Hey, everybody. How's it going? This is Rob Turley, your host of Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, the infamous, incredible podcast where we are going to dive deep down the rabbit hole with Patrick Linehan. He's an incredible guy. He has a consultancy called the Linehan Group, of course. Real creative, Patrick, right?
Thank you.
But yeah, they do great work. It has everything to do today. What we're going to be talking about is company culture and how to unfuck it. Pretty much. Essentially, and how that affects mindset and all that good stuff. But Patrick, if you can introduce yourself a little bit deeper than I did, because I can only do the surface level, because you know you better than I can ever know you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. And yeah, you're quite right. We had an amazing introduction, have a huge amount in common. I know we're both pretty passionate about a lot of the similar things. So I'm looking forward to this, and I really appreciate you reaching out to make it happen. Yes, as you said, I'm Patrick Linehan, and I'm the founding partner of the very creatively named company Linehan Group. We spent millions of dollars with marketing companies coming up with that name, as you said, Linehan Group. But
yeah, millions of dollars, then you landed on the first one, right?
Exactly, which happens actually. But yeah, as you say, we're a consulting company, but more specific to that, we focus on companies, individuals, and teams improving performance. And the reason we've come together for this conversation today is the fact that we've had a lot of chats about culture and how companies can get it right, companies can get it wrong, how many ways there are to get it wrong, and all of the ingredients that it takes to get it right. So, really looking forward to chat to you today and hash out, some of the things that we're seeing in the market work well and not work well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, and I'm looking forward to it as well. So, a constant culture that is consistent is important, and the consistency within that culture can either go positive or negative ways. And once it goes negative, it keeps becoming more and more negative and spreads like a disease. A lot of companies are focused, and I know that you would agree with this. They're focused on trying to deal with and solve issues within their company. These issues often stem from the culture and the mindset of the people within, but really they're focused on the issues that convert to revenue. So they look at where the money's bleeding out and they try to fix those things from a process perspective. But what they don't realize is that a lot of that is getting destroyed or sabotaged by the culture that exists within that company that is actually creating those problems. So people don't really look deep enough to see where it all is rooted from.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And our business process and go-to-market strategy starts, like many consulting companies, with an audit. And we do that because we have to ask questions that companies don't want to answer, right? Or they haven't thought to ask because, as you just said, they're looking in all the wrong places for the cause of the problem. And although we may have some assumptions going into a project, we have to ask some real fundamental basic questions that might seem incredibly basic in terms of culture, hiring, standard operating procedures, but we do that because if you ask the company what's wrong, why things aren't working, they'll say something like you just signposted. It's the way we're spending on marketing. It's our approach to sales. It'll be something super tactical. No one wants to say, you know what, it's the way we communicate. It's our identity. It is the top person in our company's persona that is negative and causing a cascading negativity throughout the company. No one's ever going to say these things, right?
Yeah, but because they'll feel like it's their job. If they do, they're going to lose their job.
Sure, 100%. So, I like the analogy of sometimes companies are, they're alone in the dark, in the rain, in the woods, and a really, really good cultural transformation company shows up with a map, a torch, and an umbrella, and basically says there's a safe way out of the shit that you're in. And you've named this podcast How to Unfuck Your Culture. It is a brilliant title for this podcast because from a personal point of view, I have worked with a lot of companies in China, in Singapore, in Korea, in the Middle East, now in Europe, in London for many years. Big companies, small companies, sales director at companies from solar energy consulting to real estate to media, big, small, different cultures in terms of country, in terms of company culture. And you start to very quickly see the repeat offenders in culture. the repeat offenders that are culture agnostic when it comes to values, when it comes to integrity, when it comes to choice of language. All of these things are the big glaring red flags that if these things aren't addressed and fixed, you can have the best investment, you can have the best technology stack. And I've seen this with startups, and you've seen this as well, I know. Startups that come in really heavy with a great value proposition, huge investment, a lot of gusto and bravado, and a lot of ego, and spend a lot of money on tech stack and marketing, and they disappear, or they get gobbled up, or are destroyed by the competition. Often competition that doesn't have the backing, doesn't have the financial strength that that company had, but what they had was incredible leadership, incredible advice from people who'd done it before, a premium on culture, a premium on values. And we talked about this briefly offline, but a great way to get in front of all of this stuff is how you hire, how you select and train talent, how you onboard talent. All of that stuff is almost like the prevention before the cure. Now, my business, as we talk about, is hugely based on the cure, but companies can avoid that by getting in front of it, as we talked about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because people don't realize how much a culture fit is important to the hiring process and for a team to function together. So it's not just personality traits, people doing a lot of the personality things. Yes, you can help build out and structure a team based off personalities, and then Clifton Strengths Finders and all that. Very, very useful. And that's for function, but it's not about coexistence. For people to coexist and actually feed each other in a positive way takes a lot of different things. And looking at those things when hiring, what are their skills? Great, that's tactical. What are their interests? What are their values? What are their aspirations? Who are they? What do they want to be? What are they in it for? Are they passionate about it? Because you cannot pay people to do three things. You cannot pay people to motivate them unless money's their motivator, which is actually pretty rare nowadays. You cannot pay someone to care. Essentially, you cannot pay someone to give a shit. And you cannot pay someone to like what they do, to be passionate about something. There is no amount of money that can pay anybody to actually genuinely feel those things. If you pay them more, sure, it'll drive them to work harder, but there still will not be the care, the passion, and the process that you would want to see in their work, or how they interact with the people that are there. If someone, I know that a lot of people listening to this podcast, you yourself, even myself, anyone who has worked for a company where you did not fit in their culture, where you felt like everybody was the problem, but you really were the problem, it just wasn't a good fit. You're unhappy. You'll literally drink yourself to sleep every single night. You don't want to be there. You hate your life. And it happens all too often. That person should never have been hired in the first place. And if that's happening all the time, think about what a company that has an office with 500 people in it, 250 of them are absolutely miserable. What is that going to look like?
It is a complicated web. What you're talking about there, it's really interesting. If you have, there's two things that really stood out from what you just said. One, if you have a phenomenal leader who really believes in what they're doing, I mean, deeply passionate. I'm talking about they can't sleep at night because they want to go to work the next day to have more impact and change the industry they're in. This kind of leader
described me.
Yeah, I love that, and I genuinely see that in you, right? In how you spread yourself across so many different things to move your vision forward, and I genuinely respect that. But you will attract, or anyone who is like that will attract people who gravitate towards someone like that. So there's almost like a snowball positively and a snowball negatively. So if you have a leader or an owner or a founding partner with a lack of leadership skills, character defects and lacking in values, they will hire people in their image and likeness, unfortunately. So it snowballs in the wrong direction in both ways, I've noticed. Now, there's things you can do with, like we work with a company, we work with a lot of different partners. Because, as you know, as a company, one of the things we do is we recommend other companies that can solve problems that we can't. That's a part of our strategy.
It should be a part of everyone's strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Strategic partnering has been a huge part of our success to date and will continue to be so. But there is psychometric tests that can be done on the way into a company. I'm sure you've done them in your time. I certainly have. There's one that's very well known called DISC, which is a methodology that essentially puts people in categories in terms of their personality. Now, that is a tactical tool that companies can use as a safety net or as a filter in terms of balance of the type of people that you want to have in the company. And we think that having some scientific element to the hiring process with your HR director or with the founders of the company to stop any unnecessary snowballing of repeating character defects is a really good thing to do. It basically puts some of the hiring in the hands of science rather than just let's keep hiring people like the boss.
There's Clifton strengths finders and all that, but then also hiring based off the results of those tests could also backfire too, where it's meant to assist and enhance, but it is not meant to be the be all. If that
100%.
But people make that mistake all the time, where the psychological review or test that they are having people undergo is the make it or break it to the hire, which is a huge mistake.
Agreed. And this is why I say it's a supplementary element. But if you imagine not having it as any kind of a filter or final checkpoint, I guess is what I'm saying, is what we found works really well at the early stage of hiring and building a team is that, of course, you nail down the functions that need to be filled, right? You nail down, that's the easy part.
Job. Do they have the skills? Yes. Great.
Sure.
Congratulations.
Sure. And then there's the human element, which is the interview process, which again is all going to come back to the core values of the mission, the why of the company, the big problem that is being solved that's exciting enough to get intelligent, motivated people to want to tell their friends they work for that company. There's all of that stuff at the beginning in terms of vision and mission that, again, without everything after it is doomed to fail. So it's almost like a domino effect. You have to get the big important stuff right. And then as you go down the ladder of sequence of events of building an organization and a culture, you hold yourself to the same standard of excellence that you did at stage one. And I think that all starts with, as we said before, the leadership. If you've worked, I'm sure anyone listening to this will, there'll be people who love their company, people who like their company, but see things that could be done better. There's people who are super frustrated with their company, and there's people who are just waiting to leave. All of those people are in the place that they're in because of the leadership, nothing else. People will, go into battle for a great leader, or they will give up on a great mission for a terrible leader. Which is why we have these conversations, is to try to bring a little bit of light to the industry that this is something that you've got to get right.
I love that. If you're a really damn good leader, I know that some people that work for me would literally take a bullet for me. They would do anything, anything it takes to make sure that we are successful, and I mean anything. And it's an incredible thing. But I want to bring back to that, a great leader, they'll fight to the death for you. If you're a terrible leader, they'll drop an important mission. Sure. But there are three reasons that I know of why people will leave an organization. Whether they're doing well or not well there is irrelevant to this. They will leave. Number one, they hate their manager. Mm-hmm. They will leave for that reason. Number two, they hate the culture. Just the overall. And when I say manager, I also mean leadership. They hate the leadership of the manager, whoever's above them. And then the third reason is money. They get a better offer somewhere else if their drive is money. But those are the only three reasons why people will leave. Is money. That's the lowest one. That's the least likely. Number two is the culture. And then number three is the leadership. That is the top reason people will leave. And if they're not making enough money, they're unhappy, but they have great leadership and culture, they'll stay. If they're not making enough money and the culture is kind of the leadership's really good, they'll stay. So it's like that type of a thing. There's three drivers for an individual, and that's what we need to be careful of. Where if the money becomes the reason why they stay or leave, that means something is wrong in the first place to begin with. Where have you not given them any opportunities to grow, to make more money, to actually talk to them about what that means and everything? That is up to the leadership to drive that initiative to make sure they're having those conversations, that they can excel, that they can grow, that they can become more, they can become the best version of themselves. And that's all part of the culture. From a leadership perspective, is being able to have the systems in place to grow the people that are underneath them, and to keep managers or directors from letting people grow past them. People need to grow past them. You're a good leader if you have taught someone to become better than yourself. You want to surround yourself with people who are better than yourself as a good leader. And that's what people fail to do. And usually people in lower level management or lower level leadership, they feel like there's a threat, and they don't want someone to go above them, and they shove them down, which creates a toxic culture as a result.
For sure.
That's something that's usually invisible to the leadership, because the leadership at the top is doing all this positivity and the right things on the way down, but then those individuals are creating a disconnect, right?
For sure. I think that you and I are a little bit spoiled in that we come from a very sales and business development and growth revenue type world. There are other parts of companies and organizations that cannot be judged in the same black and white way. And I think that when we help sales departments or companies to fix culture where they're all about startup mission, they're all about growth, they're all about exponential growth to reporting to the investors, it's easier, I think, to create a culture where that is the main modus operandi, because any emotion, any politics, any dispute, as you just said, someone who thinks they should be higher than somebody else, any of this stuff is resolved instantaneously by results, right? So we're a little bit spoiled when we talk about cultural transformation, because it's quite easy to set up what success looks like in a culture that is driven by purely sales, growth, expansion, sales targets, lead generation, conversion rate, all of those things. They're always going to be the leading factors. And by the way, I'm saying that's a good thing. Like, they're probably one of the best cultures I've ever worked for in the world. A company called BAMCO, which is a global sourcing company. It's a part of Superior Uniform Group, which was one of the biggest sourcing companies in the world. This company is led by a guy who's just been, voted #1 in the top 50 of sourcing companies in the world. And I just congratulated him because it got announced on LinkedIn like a week ago. But he hired me a way back, and I was one of the people that went through his hiring, his orientation, his onboarding. And I went to their office in LA, and I walked into the office. I could see everyone happy. I could see everyone clear on what they're supposed to do in a day, in a week, in a month. They knew what success looked like. They knew if they failed, there was someone right above them that would catch them when they fall. They knew that the person above them would get out of their way if they were doing really well. There was just this, I'd never seen it in my career before, and I don't think I've quite seen it to that level after. And I continue to celebrate that company as an example of a, and where does that come from, and how do they get to that? Their #1 principle is respect, integrity, and results, and extreme ownership, no excuse policy. So anyone that hears that there's a job at a company like that where you're going to get really great culture, really great support, really great perks, great salary, but expectations are massively high when it comes to performance, there's a lot of people who are going to turn away from that, even though they have all those perks, because they don't want an elite environment, because that's not what they want. They don't want that kind of pressure. They don't want to push themselves.
They want a lazy job or an easy job.
Yeah, or an easier job. It doesn't have to be an easy job, but just not that hard, right? So there's all. I often use the example of that company and that leader, because there is so many filters in how people get into that company, and there's so many retention elements that make people stay. They have such a low turnover of staff.
And for people to have that much drive, passion, and that level of expectation behind them, the leadership, the upper level or the top leadership must be so talented at inspiring to drive that type of motivation. They must.
Dude, let me just jump in there and tell you, because I'm laughing. Do you know how inspiring this guy? The guy's name of the CEO of the company is Phil Cusack, and I'm laughing just because he's so inspiring that I'm on a podcast about how to unfuck your culture, and I'm talking about him. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like that's how inspiring he is, right? I'm using him as a shining example. of how to get it right. And you nailed it. Like, you obviously haven't heard, like, you didn't know I was going to mention that company. You didn't know I was mentioning this guy, but your immediate response was, he must be a hell of an inspiring leader. Dude, I mean, I've never seen the likes of it. You know, like, in terms of people willing, as you said, to go into battle for, to show up for, to go beyond for, to never have an excuse for, to never want to let that person down. You know, and why? Not because of a militant leadership, but because he'd be the first guy to walk into the office I just told you about in LA and walk up to a guy who just got off a plane from London and say, "Hey, Patrick, how's it going? Welcome to LA. We're going to go to a Dodgers game on the weekend." You know, really, you know, he'll come down from being a CEO and be a normal guy who just talks to you as a real human being. Yeah,
it's to inspire, it's to be genuine, and it's to drive results. So showing the results that brings, and in that case, and treat people well with respect and integrity, and they will deliver the same back to you. That's the way that it's done, is that if you want them to take a bullet for you, if you want them to work their ass off, that is their choice. But driving them to make that choice, to have that level of motivation, you must inspire them, because inspiration is the strongest effect you can have on anybody. And it becomes almost, like you said, militant. They will do whatever it takes to continue to be a part of that culture and to continue to grow that culture and expand it, because it is filled with so much positivity and good. And everybody's there to help each other. So helping hands, massive. It's the connections there. But I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on that one. Is that from there, what does that teach us, seeing that?
Yeah, so, you know, here's something we've been talking about a lot as a company at Linehan Group lately. The flood of technology into the market to support growth of companies and sales enablement. And there is a lean towards trying to tech stack your way to success, okay? What we've just been talking about is the absolute other side of that coin. It is the complete human psychology, leadership, charisma, inspiration, stuff that there is no fucking app for, right?
Yeah.
This is the other side of that. And we've you know, I haven't coined the phrase Goldilocks zone, but we're using the phrase a lot, is that we are trying to help companies to find the Goldilocks zone between the importance of that psychology and the human touch and leadership and a tech stack, what's the word I'm looking for? Calibration that is optimized to match an independent startup or an individual company's needs.
It would be integrated technologies architecture. So
exactly
technologies in the architecture whereas it will be connected in the proper way, optimized, and be the best of use to anybody in the company of any division, so that it can all interconnect and intertwined without creating any issues with normalization, with accessibility, all that stuff. But again, a tech stack, that's in my realm, right? A tech stack is quite literally a tool. It is absolutely useless. If you were to leave it there on its own, it would not do anything. It is a tool for the team to use. Now, going back to the other side of the coin, like you're saying, without that other side of the coin, bright and shiny, the other side is never going to work. No matter how much money, no matter how much you spent or have optimized it, if the people aren't happy, if the culture isn't there, if the drive isn't there, the motivation, the inspiration, it doesn't matter how damn good the technology is, you will not win.
Rob, I could cry. I'm not kidding. I could cry. I won't mention, of course, any specific companies, but I could cry about companies in certain sectors with big backing, huge investment, a lot of hype, spending money on where they think the tech stack needs to be based on the shiniest object, or the, you know, just spending so much money in the wrong area. I'm talking, you know, give you an example. I won't say the name of the company, but in the space of higher education, learner management system technology, internal communication, document management.
Similar experience with a learning and psychological assessment company that I won't name either, of that same, like,
Yeah, and it's an amazing industry, by the way, and it's a fantastic time to be in it. But this, and I won't mention the company, but the general industry is booming. And this particular example that I'm talking about, and the reason why I said I could cry, is because they spent so much money on licenses, on technology, on team leaders to implement, on consultants to guide the team leaders, to integrate, multiple CRM systems in different divisions because the division leaders didn't want to use the CRM system of the other. I'm talking
Oh
about
God.
the education team and the finance team, the administration team and the success team. And it just became something that looked like it was getting worse instead of better. And guess what? The main cause of the problem that continues to exist was the leader of the company that was not able to inspire, retain staff, hire the right people, and so
There's
when
obvious
these
deviations and separations, like it's all divided. Where a company's actually in silos when it should be really more of like an actual organization, like working together, intertwining and everything. When it's all siloed out, it falls apart like that. And with those tech stack issues you're talking about, different CRMs for different, that's insanity.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's what it was,
needs to be
insanity.
normalized so they can communicate not only at a personal level, but at a technology and data level. And that creates what I like to call, well, I consider this the professional term, in this case that you just brought up, a clusterfuck.
100%.
Professional term.
100%. And it's I guess the only thing I can say is it's kind of disappointing because people are spending millions of dollars and investing millions of dollars in these ideas and these companies and these concepts. And there's one massive flaw right at the outset that if it was fixed or if it was avoided would save everybody a lot of money. And we probably have a lot more successful companies in that space if they got in front of that problem.
Yeah. And it's similar to you with my company is that we do something on the data level to help with that, but it also affects culture entirely within sales, marketing, and anybody who's tied to revenue in any single way. So that focus can be made, and so that same type of inspiration, motivation, and values can be put outward toward the prospects and the customers and the people who have interest, evangelists and everything. It gives to them so that it's not just talk to everybody to talk to nobody, just slop it around, spray and pray type of techniques. It is human to human experience that is driven by knowledge and driven by positivity, that you can really show them and have them almost adopt your culture while working with you, which is an incredible thing. But the time is needed, and the proper research, planning, and all that is needed to be able to make those connections in the first place, so that this traditional sales process that I'm literally going to rip out of this earth and throw into space, into the sun, because it is so toxic, that we need to be doing the same thing, just like you're solving and talking about with inside these companies internally. It needs to have the same effect externally. And with the current sales and marketing and advertising processes that are out there, it cannot happen. It cannot happen. And that's a serious sickness. So it's about getting extremely precise, accurate, and data-driven in every single way, while backing it with the culture that you speak of, to be able to have it work outward so that everybody is treated, and it is a customer-centric and an employee-centric process to protect both parties and to help grow and improve both parties all at once, at all times, at any cost.
Correct. And I want to just jump on one thing you said, which was it is almost like if you have an infected tooth, there is a point with that tooth where you do not try to fix it anymore. You take it out, because the risk to the body is now too severe that it is better to take it out. And we have gone into companies, Linehan Group, as consultants. We've done an audit. We've ranked them through our methodology, and we put them in a category of 1 of 5 levels of maturity when it comes to performance. And in our recommendations, sometimes we have seen a company, the leaders of the company's jaws drop when we say we recommend you fire these 5 people. And here's why. we recommend you fire. They don't have to. We're just a consultant. They can say, no, we love Dave, Gary, and Ben, and we're never going to do it, but thanks for your time, right? They can say that. But, you know, what did you hire us for? Do you want us to tell us what you want to hear and say that you have a few tactical adjustments you need to make or invest in a few things here or there? No. The main problem that you have are these 5 people are killing your business.
When I was doing an audit of a company, when I do consulting as well, I had that same thing happen. It's like, well, these 2 people, you're going to want to get rid of them. She's worked here for like 25 years. There's no performance, 0 results, holding up the rest of the team, blocking technology from getting implemented so you can get away from paper. Get rid of them. Sorry. It sounds heartless, but from a company perspective, like you said with a tooth, it's infecting everything else. You need to remove it. You need to remove it. Just give her a really nice fat, you know, walk away bonus or whatever it is, or stipend or whatever you want to hand over to her. But that's the thing, is that it happens. And it's so important to recognize that. And have you ever, question, have you ever gone into one of these companies and say, well, you know, you approach the leadership, well, you're going to, we highly recommend that you terminate these two employees immediately. And you're pointing at 2 of the 5 people in the room that are the leadership. We need to remove this, let's say the CRO, and we need to remove the CIO. They got to go. Have you ever done something like that?
So no, you know, thankfully not yet. You know, that day may come. But truthfully, when we've made recommendations in terms of leadership changes, it's been direct to a CEO or a founding partner or a board about the executing team and the leadership team underneath that. We haven't had to go into a room and have you know, a bit of an awkward moment where we've had to, you know, point someone out that's in the room. But we have suggested letting go someone, as you said, that's been in the business a long time, that has a very, very tight relationship with the person who's paying us. And you know, sometimes, you know, we've seen it go both ways, where they say, no, that's a no-go, and they do all of the other recommendations or half of the other recommendations, and they try to work around that one. And we've also had, and I mean this, we've had a client in tears because they've said, you're right. And it's taken you to tell us this, and we've heard it from their subordinates, but you're 100% right, and we're going to have to do it. And sometimes what a consultant is able to do is say, you know, this is not emotional. Here is a bunch of reasons, scientifically data-driven, that are why this is dangerous for the business and could have so many negative effects to so many stakeholders that it's just irresponsible to not do that. It's not a negative decision. It's a positive decision for 2 reasons. This person probably feels as though their job is in threat constantly, so they're in defensive mode anyway. So they're not being a good leader because they're constantly trying to defend why they should stay in the company. And number 2, when you set them free, they'll probably have the most cathartic moment that night over a glass of wine and go, oh, you know what, I'm actually kind of glad.
Yeah, no, because, it's relieving.
You know,
all that pressure, stress, and all of that just for years and years. They're just
holding on to something that you're attached to for the wrong reasons.
They're finally free, type of a thing. And also think about those people where they're not working that effectively, whatever. They may be in a higher position. Yeah, but they've been here so long, and I'm friends with them, and you know, whatever it may be. Think about everybody that works either directly with them or under them, how it's affecting them. It is creating so many problems and issues with results, issues with productivity and everything, that everything that touches or surrounds them or is under them starts to go haywire or starts to take a nosedive. And that's something you have to recognize. And think about other people's happiness and the culture. How come that person's in charge? I can't believe that our top leadership would ever keep someone like that in that position. It is absurd, and like all that. So they start doubting the leadership.
Correct. And just to sort of, you know, agree with you more on that point, we've seen that when that person's removed, the force field to talent is removed, because that person actually was blocking anyone who's a threat to them, or that person was blocking anyone that has a different set of values to them. So if that person is negative, has poor value sets, then they're not going to let anyone in, or someone's not going to want to go into a company like that. So when that person is removed, there's an amazing positivity that comes with that space that can be filled with something better. In terms of you know, mission, vision, talent, values, there's nothing like a clean slate where something hasn't been working for a really long time. Now, I'm a big Manchester United fan, and I don't know if anyone in America is going to appreciate this analogy, but the manager of Manchester United who recently got fired was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And he was a hero of Manchester United. He scored in the last minute in 1999 to win a very famous treble against Bayern Munich in the 95th minute, and he's a hero of the club. So when the opportunity came for him to step into management, everyone wanted him to win, and he was kept in his role because of a story from the past in 1999, a romantic idea of a player legend becoming the next Alex Ferguson, and he stayed way longer than he should have. And the consequences are only now being realized of having and he's not a bad guy, he's a great guy, but he was inept. He wasn't qualified. He didn't have the experience. It was his first big manager job, and it was at the biggest club in the world. Now, there's Liverpool fans and Man City fans that argue with me there, but I'm a Man United fan, so I'm going to say the biggest club in the world. But the biggest football club in the world had a manager that wasn't ready to lead a club, or personalities like Ronaldo or Pogba and people like this. So what happened was he got held hostage by bigger personalities. And I know it's a little bit of a different example, but the point that I'm making is, once he got removed, which is very recently, immediately things started to get better. We started to attract more positivity. Players started to play better under a new manager with the right credentials because they felt, holy shit, I respect this leader. This leader won't take my shit. This leader will get rid of me if I don't play to my A game. I won't get in the team. They weren't able to take the manager or the leader hostage anymore. So their level went up. And by the way, there'll be a bunch of players and coaches that leave because they were getting away with murder under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. You know what I'm saying?
Often, to put that into business perspective, it's like when the top performer becomes the manager, when they are not someone who is meant to manage, where they're just doing their work as best as possible to show the best results that they can, and they're not actually helping anybody whatsoever. They're just trying to do their best as the manager to get a bigger paycheck and to ensure that everything is going their direction so they have no threat. That's not the way to do it. They're trying to protect themselves. They've always been working for themselves, not for anyone else. It's the people who are the most supportive and helpful and can help solve problems as a team that need to take that position, which is often a much lower performer. And people need to recognize stuff like that. Just because they're doing a damn good job. Perfect example, sales. You have the highest sales 3 years running. Make him the manager. No, do not make him the manager. No, make her the manager. It's
not indicative of leadership success.
With the operations and the selling of everybody to ensure that everything is smoothly moving forward and keeping people accountable. You want her as the manager, not him. Give him a raise, give him a senior title or something like that, but that's it. That's what they get because that's what they deserve. And it's ultimately what they want. They may not think they want it, but if they were put in that manager position, they'd be miserable. And the only issue is that person would be like, oh, how come I was a manager? Be upset about it for like a week and then realize, oh, I'm making more commission. I'm making more money doing this. And I get to do the same thing without having to work with all these people. Great. But so as a takeaway from this, since we're out of time here, I'd like to, what is a takeaway from our conversation today that you want people to walk away with and remember and take action on?
Wow, that's a great question. I think if you're a startup, I would say get advice and guidance from people who have been up and down the mountain that you're about to go up many, many times. That alone will help so many startups from falling off a cliff at the first precipice. That's number one. If you are a company that feels as though you have cultural problems, it's time to be really honest with yourself, because this negativity of performance or culture or environment it's like putting the frog into the boiling water and he jumps out, but if you put him in the cold water and you boil it slowly, he'll stay there until he dies. It's like that. If you think things aren't right and you're questioning yourself, should it be this way? Should I be disappointed with this? Should this take so long for this to work? If you're asking all these questions over and over again, guess what? something's really wrong with the culture.
Or if they're
So,
straight up in denial about
yeah,
it.
that's what I mean.
It's just like any 12-step program. The accepting the problem is the first step.
Correct.
Literally is what businesses need to do, because usually it's denial from what I've seen.
Yeah, put your hands up and say, listen, when we started this, we had a vision, we had a dream, we had a plan, and it's really not going to plan. And the early indicators of that need intervention. That's what I would say, because you'll never regret fixing a problem too soon. That's basically what I would say are the key takeaways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Self-realization before you can begin to unfuck it, right?
yeah.
Otherwise, you will continue to be fucked.
100%.
And as far as enterprises, though, that are in these situations, let's use. Oh, I probably shouldn't use any names but let's use Sears as an example. They just tanked, man. But
this is the big U.S. retail outlet, right?
Yes, because they're already fucked and they wouldn't care. So, as an example, they even tried acquiring, Kmart and everything like that to try to bring them back up for the tax benefit of buying a bankrupted company, so on and so forth. But if you were to speak to a company like that, let's say they're not that low, they're at the point of no return. They're going under. But a company that is edging that region of things, it doesn't have to be retail. If they're sitting there like that, an enterprise that was a behemoth that's starting to fall and they're having a lot of organizational issues within, where would you go with that?
So people have to believe that change is possible. And what I mean by that is, if it looks like there's band-aids being put on a problem, then the people that matter in the company will continue their plan to either leave and find a better culture or just do the bare minimum to survive. But if they have some change coming down the track that can be really believed in, and what I mean is a takeover, a new investor, a new CEO, something significant that people can say, hang on a second, this is real. This is change that I can get behind and I can see how it can make my life better. There has to be something big enough, a statement change that makes the important critical mass of the culture to get behind it. That's what I'd say. So
what about
with Sears or something like that, to be an investor or new CEO.
What about a process and an operations overhaul? The whole thing is going to get redone, like gutted out and restructured.
I think so, but I think that's a tactical offshoot of that big change I talked about. Who's making that happen and why is it happening? Is it happening because we've got this new killer CEO that's been headhunted from, and I don't know what Sears' competitors are. I daren't take a stab in the dark at the US retail market, but is it Bloomingdale's? Am I way off?
Yeah.
But something like that, to have been headhunted and made the decision and bet his career or her career on coming in and being the change, can sometimes get enough of a story, enough of a narrative, enough of, in this case, it would be media and publicity around it that would make people say, I'm going to stay, and make people say who are looking for a job in key roles, this is the time to go to Sears because there's a new sheriff in town and there's a new culture coming. And people love to get into a company when chaos is becoming order, because it's the smartest time to get into anything.
Yeah, and they can help make it their own too.
Exactly, and get titles and roles and opportunities to be a part of sculpting that cultural revolution.
Absolutely love it. Great takeaway. Now, there's a takeaway for startups, for mid, and for enterprises. That's beautiful, beautiful. So, Patrick, honestly, it was more than a pleasure. I would love to say thank you for coming on here and being so just energized and incredible.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. It's a great topic, and I never get bored of talking about. And I learn something every time I dive into these conversations. So thanks, Rob.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So what would be the best place for people to contact you and the best place to find you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is at Linehan at linehangroup.com, or message us at clientsuccess@linehangroup.com, or find us on our website at linehangroup.com, or through LinkedIn.
Perfect. That sounds great. I'll have those things linked in the description. So if anybody wants them, they're linked down there. So his website, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. Yeah, I want to say thank you for everybody for being here. I thought it was an incredible discussion, how to unfuck your company. Fantastic, because so many are, right? Especially after COVID, everything's up in the air when it comes to organizational issues. But this is Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. I am your host, Rob Turley, co-founder, co-CEO at White Rabbit Intel. And of course, this podcast is sponsored by and brought to you by White Rabbit Intel. We are AI innovators that solve wicked, wicked problems. So pretty cool stuff. Thank you, everybody, again. And if you share this, please put the link to the episode or the website, or use hashtag DTRH podcast. Much appreciated. All righty. Have a good night.
If you enjoyed this episode, follow Down the Rabbit Hole podcast for new episodes weekly on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and YouTube. If you'd like to apply to be featured on the podcast or recommend a featured guest, please feel free to email us at theteam@whiterabbitintel.com.